One of the most well-known lines in human history reads, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." It paints a vivid image, an all-powerful being, conjuring the universe into existence, snapping fingers, calling forth the stars, sculpting the oceans, lighting the skies, and breathing life into the world. But what if that's not quite what happened? Yes, there is a God. But what if the way he created wasn't through sudden, magical gestures, but through laws of physics, calculated evolution of species, vast timescales, and the slow, deliberate unfolding of a universe governed by order? What if science doesn't deny the divine, but reveals the mechanics of its work? And like many of you, I seek understanding. I look for explanations, not to disprove belief, but to deepen it. First, we must recognize that the Bible, as we know it today, is the result of centuries of translations, revisions, and romanticized interpretations. Versions like the King James, New American Standard, or New Living Translation often smooth language for readability, but in doing so may lose the nuance of the original text. Take Genesis 1:1 for example. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's what we read in the RSV, KJV, ASV, and ESV. But in literal Hebrew, the verse translates more closely to, "When God began to create the heavens and the earth." It's a small shift, but a powerful one. It implies not a creation from nothing, but a transformation of an existing, perhaps chaotic, state. It decentralizes the human perspective. The text becomes less about absolute beginnings and more about a shaping of what already was. Secondly, let's talk about time. The Genesis narrative divides creation into days, and these have often been interpreted literally. But as science has shown, time is relative. A day on Venus is 5,832 hours. That's 243 Earth days. So what, then, is a day to a divine or cosmic being? Species evolve, continents drift, life forms rise and fall over millions of years. Could 6 days of creation be 6 great epochs in Earth's history? Perhaps Genesis isn't a scientific error, but a poetic metaphor for something far grander than a 24-hour clock. In this video, we're going to look deeper at a few Genesis verses, through both a theological lens and a scientific one. Let's challenge ourselves to think beyond the surface, because maybe science doesn't undo religion, it helps us see it more clearly. The opening line of the Bible is simple, poetic, and profound, but in ancient Hebrew it meant more than just sky and soil. You see, Biblical Hebrew had only around 9,000 words, compared to over 170,000 in modern English. It didn't have a word for universe, so instead it used a merism, a figure of speech where two opposite parts represent a whole. Heavens and earth wasn't about two locations. It meant everything, all existence, all space, time, and matter. Now here's where science starts to echo scripture. The Big Bang Theory also tells us that the universe had a definite beginning. About 13.8 billion years ago, all matter, energy, space, and even time itself emerged from a single, unimaginably dense point. Before that, there was nothing, not even time. This explosive expansion is what we now call the Big Bang. It was, in scientific terms, a creation event. But here's the catch. While science can trace everything after the bang, the cooling, the galaxies forming, the birth of stars and planets, it cannot explain what caused it. Was it a conscious, divine force, or in quantum fluctuation in a timeless void? That's where physics ends, and philosophy, or faith, begins. So when Genesis says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," it may not be primitive poetry. It may be ancient insight into something science is only just beginning to understand. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved over the waters. This verse describes a world that doesn't yet exist, one that is empty, dark, and shapeless. And remarkably, modern cosmology tells a similar story. Just after the Big Bang, there were no galaxies, no stars, no planets, no Earth. The universe was formless, a swirling sea of pure energy, dominated by quantum fluctuations. It was empty, not in the way we think of a vacuum, but because matter had not yet condensed. There was energy, yes, but no structure, no meaning, no life. Darkness over the face of the deep. That's not just poetic. It mirrors the cold, opaque, lightless chaos of the early universe. For hundreds of thousands of years, light existed, but it couldn't travel freely. Photons were trapped, constantly scattering in a dense fog of electrons. Then, something extraordinary happened. Cosmic inflation, a scientific theory that posits a moment of exponential expansion, faster than the speed of light, that shaped the universe as we know it. It's a mysterious, one-time event that physics still can't fully explain. A miracle, a mechanism. Both science and scripture point to something unique, something foundational. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. This moment parallels what physicists call recombination, when the universe cooled enough for atoms to form, allowing light to finally break free. The cosmic fog lifted, and the universe filled with radiance. But there's often confusion here. How could there be light before the sun was created on day 4? Well, consider this. In the earliest stages of Earth's formation, our atmosphere was dense, thick with gas and debris. The sun may have existed, but its light couldn't reach the surface. Much like a cloudy day where it's bright outside, but you can't see the sun itself. The light was present before the sun was visible. So, "Let there be light" may not refer to the creation of light itself, but rather its arrival on Earth's surface, a profound turning point in the planet's ability to support life. God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." This verse might sound poetic, even confusing, to a modern ear. But if we read between the lines and study the original Hebrew, something fascinating emerges. Ancient Hebrew had no word for fluid. So when the text says waters, it may not mean H2O in the literal sense. It could simply be referring to fluid-like substances, the primordial states of matter. In modern cosmology, there's strong evidence that the early universe formed from the interplay of two fluids, a quark-gluon plasma, the hot, dense soup of subatomic particles that behaved like a perfect liquid, and the flexible fabric of space-time itself, which in quantum gravity models can behave almost like a fluid in motion. This gives us a new lens to view the line, a firmament dividing the waters. Perhaps it's a metaphorical description of separation and structure, a phase change from chaos into order, from unbounded fluid into defined space. Even the great medieval Jewish philosopher Maimonides acknowledged the mystery of this passage. In the Guide for the Perplexed, he warned against literal interpretation, explaining that the waters above the firmament were not physical water at all, but symbolic of something deeper, something mysterious and immaterial. God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let dry land appear." Now we turn to Earth. This verse aligns perfectly with plate tectonics. Our planet was once a molten, chaotic sphere. But over millions of years, Earth's crust cooled, hardened, and cracked into shifting plates. Continents rose from the oceans. Land masses collided and drifted. Pangaea, the ancient supercontinent, formed then split, giving rise to the world we know today. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. Now things get truly biological. According to evolutionary science, the first multicellular life emerged from the oceans, exactly as Genesis suggests. Around 600 million years ago, during what's called the Cambrian explosion, the seas burst with new and bizarre life forms: jellyfish, trilobites, segmented worms, and primitive ancestors of nearly every animal we know today. The Bible refers to the great sea monsters. In Hebrew, the word tananim is used, a term sometimes translated as dragons or monstrous sea creatures. Some scholars believe this could metaphorically represent large marine reptiles or even whales, animals that would have been awe-inspiring to ancient humans. In science, we see Mosasaurus, ichthyosaurs, and later Leviathan-like whales as fitting candidates. Then comes the sky, and Genesis mentions birds. Evolution tells us that birds evolved from dinosaurs, reptiles, in the Mesozoic era. Specifically, small feathered theropods like Archaeopteryx represent a transitional species between reptiles and modern birds. They truly were the first to fly across the expanse of the heavens. So, Genesis and science agree on the sequence. First life began in the ocean, then life took to the sky. God said, "The earth shall bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." At this point in both Genesis and evolutionary history, mammals appear, a significant development in Earth's biological timeline. These are the creatures most relevant to human life: livestock, cattle, goats, sheep, creeping things, rodents, insects, reptiles, beasts of the earth, lions, wolves, elephants. Science agrees. Mammals, particularly placental mammals, rose to dominance after the extinction of the dinosaurs roughly 65 million years ago. They diversified rapidly, filling ecological roles and becoming both prey and predator. And crucially, they formed relationships with humans, whether by domestication or survival-driven conflict. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The Hebrew word used for these animals is nephesh, often translated as soul, or creature with life breath. While it can refer to any living being, in this context, it likely highlights animals with sentience, emotional depth, and behavioral complexity. Genesis 1:26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. This marks a turning point in the Genesis account, the moment humankind enters the scene. But what if this wasn't a single act in a single moment, but a process? From an evolutionary perspective, hominids, our distant ancestors, have walked the earth for millions of years. Fossils show a long, winding journey, from Australopithecus to Homo habilis, and eventually to Homo sapiens, who appeared roughly 300,000 years ago. Some see this timeline as a contradiction, but what if it's not? What if Genesis wasn't describing an instant creation, but a divine process unfolding over eons? What if "let us make man in our image" reflects a gradual emergence, not just of form, but of mind, of consciousness? Because it isn't simply our intelligence that sets us apart. Other species show cleverness, tool use, even emotion. What truly separates us is something else: self-awareness, the capacity for morality, the haunting sense of mortality, the drive to ask why. This mysterious, almost sacred awareness, the inner light of human thought, may be what Genesis means by image and likeness. You don't need to believe in divine fingerprints to appreciate how profound that is. But if you do, you might say that God didn't just make us from dust. He gave us mind, and the process of becoming human was as awe-inspiring as the stars themselves. As science continues to progress, more and more of what was once considered supernatural now has a framework, an explanation. But this doesn't mean that religion is wrong or irrelevant. Far from it. The teachings of love, compassion, humility, and justice found in Christian values and many faiths are timeless. They're moral compasses, guiding how we treat one another. This discussion isn't about discrediting belief. It's about exploring the origins of the stories, the history behind the verses, and how ancient language can find resonance in modern knowledge. So, keep an open mind, whether you're a believer, a seeker, a skeptic, or a scientist. We're all asking the same questions, and maybe the answers aren't found in choosing between faith and science, but in the places where they converge.